Hello and welcome back. I'm with Nathan Martin. Nathan, who are you with?
I am with Fish Grakowski.
Together we are Mandalore, Edmonton's premier The Mandalorian Zoom conversation. Yeah, anyway. So today we're talking about Mandalore, the Mandalore episode 11, which was called the Heiress.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce? Personally, is that how you pronounce Heiress, or do you say Heiress?
I say Heiress.
Okay, very good. That's probably because that's how it's pronounced.
Probably.
And as usual, I'm going to hand it off to you. What do you think?
All right. I really enjoyed this episode. It was a lot. It was a lot of fun. I don't have too many criticisms so much, but I will say that this was the shortest episode so far this season, and the previous episodes were obviously longer because I just said that. But this was one episode that I really felt like we could have used a couple of more minutes. My only real criticisms that aren't nitpicky, just real criticisms, were just I wish we had a little bit more time with the characters, because when we meet Katie Sackhoff's character, she drops like a legit bomb on Mando, and it's kind of just like, okay, well, we're moving on. I guess we'll figure out if that pays off. And I love the heistiness of it and taking over the Empire. This is like cameos galore, and it was a lot of fun. I just kind of wish we had a little bit more time with it. That's all. How about you?
We'll get to that. What's the bomb you're talking about?
Was she basically is just like, oh yeah, you're part of like a crazy religious sector that, and it's just like, we're just not even going to marinate on that. We're just and he doesn't even really react to it, which I found kind of strange. Like he doesn't have well, wait a minute. Hold on. Like there was really no explanation.
I think they're kind of in the middle. They're sort of in the middle of a tense situation. Well, they're at the end of a tense situation when that happens.
Yeah.
But
That's true.
I didn't mind that, because in a way it's kind of like, it's almost like two opposing points of view on Twitter meeting each other or something. They're like, oh yeah, you're one of those.
Yeah.
That's what she says. She says you're one of those. And then his reaction is kind of like, you're not a real Mandalorian either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wide brush strokes. I kind of thought the episode was, I really liked all the CGI action stuff. I thought it was awesome. I'm not, here's my issue. And I don't think I'm freaking out, but I definitely love, let's talk about this. The Mandalorian is the best Star Wars TV show that we've seen so far.
I'd argue it's one of the better Star Wars anythings.
Enterprises, period. Yeah, I'd put it up right up there with the movies in a way. And so I like the fact that it is trying to glue together these kind of divergent, show writers, and so this show very much brought in Clone Wars and Rebels. I'm really curious how people who don't know anything about Clone Wars and Rebels, and I think there's going to be quite a few of them, would feel about the fact that all of a sudden we're dealing with a character named Bo-Katan, who is, as far as we see her on screen, she's just sort of a tough Mandalorian with a different world. But I mean, that's some deep stuff. Like that really gets into, like, her sister was Obi-Wan Kenobi's girlfriend, and she sort of was mixed up with Darth Maul, and there's all this stuff that in a way I don't necessarily want to be dwelling on all that much. And I know Filoni's involved, and he's involved with the other shows, but it's kind of, it sort of muddies it a little bit. Like didn't you sort of like how the Mandalorian had its own kind of weird versions of Mandalorians?
Yeah.
If you watch the cartoons, you're going to be like, but that's not how they're done in the cartoons. This episode explains that.
Yeah.
But does it, like, it's almost like you're smashing these different mythologies together, and it's in a way that they explain and make sense, but in a way it's sort of like, it's reminding me of Star Trek, where it's kind of like explaining things a lot in a certain
way. I know early on, I think in a review show last season, I remember you commenting on the fact that you really enjoy what the show is doing in terms of like, it is Star Wars, but it's more Star Wars adjacent as opposed to in the like, hey, there, Ben, like there were no direct references. This is definitely one of the first episodes where like Bo-Katan grabbing Titus Whaler up against it. And she's like, where's the dark saber? This felt very much like this is happening in a Star Wars. We get the mention of Ahsoka at the end of the episode. So it did feel a little weird, but I enjoyed it because of who was on the show, because that makes it cool. There's little nitpicky things, but for the most part, I don't think that it's going to, like, we knew coming into the season, there were so many mentions of who was getting cast and whatnot and stuff like that. So we kind of knew what we were going to get into. But what this show does a lot is when it does give us that fan service that maybe we weren't even expecting, or maybe we didn't even know that we wanted, it's usually gone within the next episode.
Yeah.
So I find that I can't really be negative on that, because we knew this was eventually our first episode this season. Boba Fett shows up at the end, so there's definitely like a nice little weaving that's going on. I just don't know what kind of rug it's going to make.
Yeah. Like this one felt like we were really driving into the suburbs of the sort of extra material, like expanded universe kind of stuff almost. And I don't want to go there that much. I also don't want to be a grouch about it. All I'm saying is that my favorite version of the Mandalorian is kind of when he's going to new places that we don't know anything about, and you don't know what's going to happen. Right now, I can tell you with I'm completely confident an episode or two from now, he's going to go meet Ahsoka. He's going to say, they'll get sort of this compressed history of the Jedi. She's going to say that she doesn't really care about the Jedi. Like, she did drop her lightsaber in the last episode of the Clone Wars, which was incredible stuff. Like, I love that. But then all of a sudden, and then they'll leave. Like obviously it's not going to be the Mandalorian Ahsoka, the child show. So, I mean, all of this in a way it's fan service, but it feels predictable to me in a certain sense. And so I'm a little less excited about the whole thing. I'm spending a lot of time complaining about something I like. I think the episode's good. I just don't want it to keep relying on, as much as I like the stuff on Tatooine, my favorite stuff on Tatooine probably is Amy Sedaris as Peli, rather than, here's, this Sandcrawler again, or here's the Tusken Raiders, or, here's Luke's place. They haven't done that yet, but,
no.
I'm sure one of these days, right? Overall, though, the best part of this episode to me was kind of like jumping into a new world, a whole new scene. The fact that the frog lady meets her husband, who is Kermit the Frog. And he talks like Miss Piggy. Like, the second they got together, I'm like, oh, green and pink, it's Piggy, and it's Kermit the Frog and Miss Froggy. And that was all super great. Nerd stuff like the ATST sort of like shipping container crane. That was so good. Fresh ideas. But back to and one more thing that I completely loved is that Silas from Deadwood was the Imperial commander on that freighter.
Yes.
So now we have three, because Bullock was the marshal. And then Dan was underneath that makeup. I looked it up. Dan was underneath all that makeup in the first episode from Deadwood. So Swearinger, his gang is well represented, which is so awesome. Just love it, because again, it puts something in your head of Westerns. That's all. Yeah,
very much so. Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. I liked. I kind of liked a little bit of this episode had a lot of humor that wasn't not slapsticky so much, but like when he lands the Raven Crest, it falls into the water, and then they tow it out, and then he's like, can you fix it? And as he's walking away, the guy's like, I mean, I could put gas in it if it'll even hold gas. And there was a lot of like sort of quips in a lot of ways, especially when they're taking on the like the Imperial cruiser, and they're like, "How many men is it?" And they're like, "Oh, it's like 10 or 12." And then the guy's like, "Beep, boop, beep." It's like, "It's showing 4, sir." You know, and that kind of stuff I really enjoy. I think that was very, very entertaining. For sure.
Friend, he says, you know, it's stormtroopers, so they couldn't hit the side of a bantha, which is great. She's got probably the best line in the show, which is like, "Put some tea on, we'll be up in a minute."
Yeah.
Like, we're taking the ship.
Oh, that was so good. And when they finally realized where they have them, is like, "We have them locked down in the cargo bay." The what? And then and they're all gone, and they're just like, "Okay, well, that was one way of dealing with it. All right."
And we saw something really interesting there too with that Imperial commander against Silas from Deadwood, but he's got a bit of a, like, he's sort of almost religious about the Empire, which I kind of got. You know, like Moff Gideon comes on and it's like, you know what you have to do. He blasts the 2 guys away, and I like that, because throughout Star Wars you kind of feel like everybody's just sort of forced into the Empire or whatever, but this guy seems like he really believes in what the Empire stands for, and he's willing to die for it.
Yeah.
So
nice little the suicide pill with the electrical thing. I'd never seen that before. That was an interesting.
Basically, it was so Bryce Dallas Howard directed this one. She did the really awful one in the first season, so it was nice to see her get a way better one. I would say, to me, like, did you like this one more than the previous episode, or about the same, or?
I liked this one more than the second episode. I know I was a little down on the second episode last week. I do like this one. I did like this one a lot more, and that's one of the main reasons why I wish we kind of had a little bit more time with it, because it felt like it was just going like poop, 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 breakneck speed a little. There was no time to breathe. I was sort of hoping there was going to be a payoff for Baby Yoda eating those eggs. There wasn't. Well,
they softened him, right? Like, especially in the end, you see him, he's sort of lovingly holding a tadpole, maybe to eat it. But I mean, like, he seems to be learning a lesson about, oh, I ate these people's children. Maybe it's starting to sink in. Communication's always very strange, because it was unclear in the last episode if the frog woman could understand Mando, but she full on for sure understands him by this episode. So that's been maybe she was a little shy. She's kind of a nerd. She's into robots, so she basically was just embarrassed because this hunky guy in a suit is talking to her. But the show that we're doing is called Mandalore. So I mean, as much as I kind of was crying about it, I mean, the fact is Bo-Katan is part of this giant Mandalorian history in the show. And I mean, like, if you don't know this, she is basically supposed to be the leader of Mandalore after the cartoons had a whole bunch of civil wars and mucking around with Darth Maul and all that. But the dark saber sword, which we saw Moff Gideon with it cutting out of the TIE fighter at the end of last season, that's her sword. So ultimately, her motivation seems to be that she wants to get her sword back. But I mean, ultimately, she wants to, be the leader of her people again, I guess.
Yeah. And that was definitely mentioned too, because even, I guess I was nitpicking on it earlier, but clicking it back in my head, where they were talking about the 2 opposing ideologies of the Mandalorian, Mando, and the Mandalorian Bo-Katan, is him saying like, "Oh, well, Mandalore is, it's a horrible place," and she's kind of like, "You don't believe everything you hear," kind of thing. And I sort of like that.
I love it. I love that. I mean, and moving something forward. That's the old cartoon Mandalore, which honestly I was always slightly bored with until the end of Clone Wars. That's the old Mandalore bumping against this new Mandalore. It's interesting. She says that, he's sort of part of something called the Watch. Now, in the cartoon, there was something called Death Watch, and they were terrorists and, not good people ultimately. So I think that's sort of interesting. And she basically thinks he's in a religious cult.
Yes.
And yet she says this is the way. I wondered if that was sarcastic at first, but then she says it again. So just like, they're kind of retconning things a little bit, because as far as I can recall in Death Watch, if the watch is Death Watch, they would take their helmets off. They didn't say this is the way, but post Empire, post Purge, what I loved about the Mandalorian when it first showed up, it's just like, oh, this is what the Mandalorians have become. Like they've been reduced to this nothing, running, terrified organization. And I think that actually pinpoints kind of what I maybe wasn't craving from this show, was to go back to the old way, because I really like the idea that maybe there's just a few hundred Mandalorians left out of a population of millions or billions or whatever. And so, but no, they're around, and so in a sense, they're hiding and never showing their face and all that is a little bit for nothing now, because the bottom line is these other Mandalorians, you know, they're living kind of a grubby pirate lifestyle or whatever, but they're also confronting the Empire directly, and so it ain't over for them. So I think that honestly is exactly what I kind of don't like about this. It's just like, okay, well, but whatever, the world's complicated.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely fits in with, I mean, I'd argue more so this episode specifically, of hammering in very much the theme that this show is presenting us, which is the opposing views of different, like we've consistently had these. The last episode with the X-Wing fighters, the guy flat out says, like, you should be under arrest, but these are trying times. Like there's a consistency to it. So I can't hate it because it's already been in the show. Like this is the story that they're telling. I think it's just, I'd like to see where it's going, but I'd also like to see Grief and Kara again.
Yeah. No, and I'm sure we'll get them. No, you hit on something terrific there. In the same way that Silas kills himself because of his, you know, very dedicated belief in the Empire.
Yeah.
The way in the last episode we saw Carson and Filoni, you know, be kind of schlubby jerks in a certain sense. I watched it again and I'm like, okay, I love them honestly in the last episode. So that was great. But I love that it's not just black and white, and that's awesome. Incidentally, I've been wondering this all week. You were talking about your wife watching the last episode and the spiders and all that. How did she end up reacting to that? She
actually the initial, when they started to open, she was like, but once the big ugly one showed up, she was completely okay. As long as I guess it's just when they're small and hairy. This is what I found out. Small and hairy, bad. Big, gross. She's okay with it. She was completely fine with it.
This is the rule of spiders in general, I think. Yes. Like when they crawl away under something, you don't like them. But like, I mean, I've had numerous tarantulas on my hand, and it didn't that primal fear that I inherited from my mother. But well, what do you think is going to happen next? I mean, do you think they're my guess is that he's going to be on his way to Ahsoka, and then he'll get distracted, but we'll get her. I mean, you know, either way, I hope we don't spend too long with her in
I don't know. Because realistically, when I heard about the casting choice of Rosario Dawson, I was like, that is so unbelievably fantastic. I cannot wait to see her as Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she's just going to be like a lot of the other characters that are from, you know, previous things. It's I think she'll pop up for one episode and either be able to offer help, or maybe be like, you know what, I'm not part of that anymore. So, because that would actually keep the journey going for Mandalorian himself, more so than every time he comes across someone who says that they can help him, they kind of can a little bit, but then they can only get him to the next step. It's kind of like a plotting out a video game in a way. And that might end up sending him back to where he began, or reaching out to his friends and whatnot. There's a part of me that honestly thinks that we might see Darth Maul in this world.
Isn't he? Let me think. Is he dead?
I can't remember.
Yeah, he died in Rebels. Spoiler. So Obi-Wan killed him in
Rebels. Right.
Yeah, it's okay. My head was doing that math earlier too, and and the more stormtroopers you throw onto things, the more confusing you make it, because you're like, oh, I guess that just didn't happen. It just didn't work. I mean, it happened, but it didn't work.
Do we know what the timeline was in Rebels that he was actually killed though?
Yeah, I think we do.
Because I know Obi, like that scene between Obi and Maul. Now that you said it, is brilliant. Some of the best animation.
Let me put it this way: it's before the Death Star.
Okay.
Because one dies on the Death Star, right? So it has to be before that. But you know, whatever. I mean, we'll get a hologram or something. Who knows? But I mean, the actor. Well, now he's been shamed, so I don't think we'll be seeing him again. But I mean, you know, Maul is back in play thanks to the Solo movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I you know, switching channels a little, like in Picard, we had 7 of 9, and she was a total mess, and really quite believably screwed up until she wasn't. But I mean, like, that's the Ahsoka I want to see. I want to see somebody who went through the Clone Wars, is a vet, and really kind of messed up. But I mean, honestly, they're great writers, so
yeah,
I trust them no matter what. I mean, maybe she found peace and she's awesome too. Like, yeah. Just I think everybody, you were saying something funny there where everybody helps Mando a little bit. If I was going to start making fun of something in this show, which I am as of this episode doing, they help Mando a little bit by completely saving his life, because he would have dead. Like Mando almost dies kind of, you know, I would say 1 out of 2 episodes, and I would say 2 out of 3 of those, we'll do the math later, but I'll make a chart, but 2 out of 3 of those is someone else saves him. The cavalry comes in quite a lot. Like he should start believing in the Force, honestly. The Force of friendship.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Anything else?
No, I'm excited to see where it goes. And what else is going on? It's just the show does a really good job of just like I wish they all came out, but then if they all came out at once, it would be really hard to do the show.
That's and seeing the way Favreau is writing this, like the fact that we came back to Peli, the fact that we went back to Killick, I think the Ugnaught anyway. Yeah. And he seems to be pretty good about leaving things, and then like we are for sure going to see Bo-Katan again, like no question at all. What I don't want is, you know, 5 years from now, this show being all about like the politics of Mandalore and everybody's got you know, like whatever. there's 20 Yodas around, I don't know, whatever. But anyway, still looking forward to it. Sorry for being such a whiner. There's just something gnawing at me about muddying the waters with the cartoons too much. The cartoons have some of the best stuff ever in them. But Clone Wars ended. That last episode of Clone Wars, if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching the entire series, which is kind of a bad series quite often, but it's worth watching it just for that last episode. That last moment of Darth Vader picking up Ahsoka's lightsaber. If you didn't know this, Ahsoka was Vader's apprentice. Should have mentioned that off the top, but and just a little bird in the sky and the music and the Clone War the Clone Trooper helmets all painted with Ahsoka's paint, and then it was just incredible. It was great. That was a better job of bringing everything together than I've seen in almost anything in the last few years.
Yeah,
so
same with
Filoni broke into it.
Same with like the last 2 or 4 episodes of Rebels that are basically like an animated film.
I wanted to punch myself in the face with the space wolves and the I guess he's in kind of like, I don't know, some kind of like time bandits heaven or something. Like he's standing on these whatever.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm glad you enjoyed it, but oh man. Yeah. I mean, but remember that though, actually great point to bring up. At the end of Rebels, Ahsoka and Sabine, a Mandalorian graffiti artist, take off to go find Ezra. So maybe that's in there too.
Maybe.
We'll see. I don't care. No, just kidding. I care. I care about Mandalorian more than I care about that stuff. All right.
Okay, I think we can.
Let's bury this. Okay. See you guys next week. Sorry for being a whiner. Nathan, you're great as always. Later.
Later.